Displaced, George. Written by Spider's Accident. Chapter 1. It was a beautiful day in the magical land of Equestria. Birds were blooming, flowers are screaming, and something vomited through the fabric of reality, leaving it stained and murky. Button Mash sat around a table with his friends, table adorned with miniature adventurers, paper, and dice. The young colt picked up a hoofful in his hooves, rolling them with tense excitement.
3 ones? No, I was so close!
Button Mash threw his hooves back, yelling dramatically. The baby dragon across the table, Spike, looked up from behind a sheaf of papers. Triple botch. Your wizard fails to cast his spell and the dragon sits on him. Beard the wizardly explodes in a shower of pancaked organs, which the dragon then incinerates. Apple Bloom, a yellow filly, snorted soda from her nose in a chuckle.
Haha! Button Mash, you got totally pwned!
Spike turned towards the yellow filly. Your move, Maplehood of the Fae.
Start casting my Fairy Rain ability to give the dragon debuffs to its fire, and
The trio looked up from their game, eyeing the room.
The heck was that?
Apple Bloom said. The basement door opened, and a purple unicorn looked through, eyes on the falls.
Are you okay down there? Spike, did you break something?
Spike waddled towards the unicorn. No, Twilight, it was probably just one of your experiments or something. Now please go! Twilight put a hoof on Spike's head, ruffling his spines.
Well, alright then. Have fun with your doo-doo game.
Spike shoved her hoof off his head, trying to close the door. Twilight, it's called D&D, he said, his feeble attempts to close the door winning no ground. Twilight activated her horn, magically re-ruffled his head spines, and closed the basement door. Spike turned to Button Mash and Apple Bloom, who idly stared at their phones. Okay, now, where were we? Apple Bloom, Spike, and Button Mash jumped, Spike skittering around the room in a panic.
I think that came from the closet!
Apple Bloom said, pointing a shaking hoof towards a bulging wardrobe. The sides and doors of the wardrobe sagged outwards like a fat man with cake. Spike scuttled towards it, knocking lightly on the front of the doors. Hello? The wardrobe exploded in a pile of splinters and sawdust at the sheer bulk of the monster that strode forth from the pile. The floor creaked and sagged under its hulking footsteps, jagged tail cutting through the floorboards like butter. Fire bloomed from its maw, and it turned its toothy head towards a band of would-be adventurers who screamed in horror and terrified awe. George blinked. His vision was full of so many colors, embers dancing in front of his eyes. He flailed about, trying to get bearings through the colors that screamed around him. Recalibrating vestibular system... He coughed, as fire came out of his mouth. His body felt heavy. What is happening? His eyes stopped rolling. Greetings, entities, George said, falling over. A great snoring ushered forth from the ember-covered nostrils of the hulking thing. Button Mash poked it with a stick as Apple Bloom and Spike cowered in the corner. What is that thing? Spike said.
Is it what, being a dragon?
Apple Bloom said, forcing a country drawl as she eyed the creature and Spike.
Guys, I think it's Bowser!
Button Mash said, giddily poking it with a stick.
Is that some kind of dragon, y'all?
Apple Bloom said, walking up to the sleeping mass. The beast grunted in its sleep, plumes of smoke billowing from its nose holes.
No, he's from Super Mario Bros. He's the final boss,
Button Mash said. Spike raised a scaled eyebrow. You mean from your video games? Button Mash grinned broadly.
Yeah, this is so cool! He's gonna kidnap the princess, and I'll never have to go to bed again! And bedtimes will be illegal! I'm gonna be a Goomba!
Spike and Apple Bloom rolled their eyes.
And what if he just up and eats every pony? He's a dragon, right?
Button Mash and Spike stared at Apple Bloom. Spike coughed, and Apple Bloom stared at her hooves, face turning red. George opened his massive eyes slowly, vision clearing. He heard muffled conversation nearby. Turning towards the noise, he saw a small yellow horse, Equus cabalis, a brown horse, and a purple lizard creature, species unknown, error, were huddled together. Button Mash waved his hooves at the others.
Look, I'm just saying, if he kidnaps Celestia, then we'll never have bedtimes again!
But I need the sun to grow my apples! And anyway, what about that new one, the blue Celestia? Can't she just keep moving the sun?
Bowser could kidnap both of them! He's the strongest!
Button Mash said. Spike looked up from his comic book, face turning frightful. Guys, it's awake. George stood up, head bonking on the ceiling. Ouch! The trio jumped backwards. The massive beast looked around the room with now unglazed eyes, taking in color and shape, eyes settling on the gaming table in front of him. Why are you a horse? He said to the air, eyes still locked on the table. Button Mash and Applebloom looked at each other and nervously stepped backwards. Spike waddled forwards, extending an open claw. Hello, Mr. Dragon. What's your name? Are you new to Equestria? Spike gulped. You do know not to eat ponies, right? George grabbed Spike's hand in his own massive fist. My diet consists of that which lurks in the hall outside my apartment, in the glowing box. I give it money and it feeds me. Spike's head tilted sideways. You mean a vending machine? I didn't know they had those in the Dragonlands. How'd you get here anyway? Did one of Twilight's experiments zap you here or something? George looked at the person. I don't know. I came through a long hallway and I met a man who asked me what I wanted. Is that a D&D game? Applebloom smiled and trotted forward.
Yeah, you know about D&D? Y'all want to join the game?
Spike turned to her. Applebloom, I'm the DM. I don't have the campaign set up for 3 players.
Oh, come on, Spike. You gotta admit 2 players is hardly enough. Our games have gotten a bit boring ever since Dinky moved away.
Applebloom said. Spike put his palm over his forehead. Okay, fine. You want to play, Bowser? George stopped breathing, mind moving inward. Sapient entity requests engagement in friendship ritual. No, stop that, George. You're thinking weird again. Talk normal, don't say anything creepy. You're aware of the rules for the game, so you should be able to generate minimum confusion. You may even be able to add points to the friendship list if this goes well. George unfroze. I shall play a Mind Flayer assassin. My enemy's very souls shall collapse under... George coughed, spewing embers. Spike flipped through his gaming manual. Applebloom trotted to the table, along with Button Mash, who skipped to the table happily. Spike held up his hands. Hold on, let me tell you the setting first. Oh, and Applebloom, I rolled the dragon's attack earlier. Mabelhood of the Fae has been triple pulverized.
What?
Applebloom said, tail bushing up. So you all get a new start. You're in the town of Freeport, a city of rogues and ne'er-do-wells, a city of crime and nefarious magics, rolled over by a powerful magus gone rogue. Button Mash raised a hoof.
Are there pirates?
Spike rolled his eyes, chewing on a ruby. Of course there are pirates. Let me finish, please. You all arrive on a boat together, a loyal band of adventurers seeking fame and fortune. Now, get to character creation. Applebloom seethed.
Move kill of a character off on the side like that, Spike.
Spike's eyes opened wide, and the room filled with violet light, a loud beeping emanating from the ceiling.
The is going on?
Spike gulped, turning to her. You activated Twilight's magic swear folder. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna be in so much trouble. He turned to George, biting his nails. The trio and the George turned their heads towards the basement door, which ushered forth a furious knocking.
Spike, what have I told you about swearing? And around other ponies, for crying out loud!
Twilight said, muffled voice sending shivers down Spike's spine. It wasn't me, it...
I don't want to hear it, Spike! Oh, and Applebloom, Button Mash, there's pudding in the fridge if you want any.
Twilight said, hoof-step noises receding into the distance. The ponies and dragons sat in stunned silence, save for George, who scribbled furiously onto a nearby piece of paper, periodically picking up new pencils as they snapped between his muscled claws. Spike glared at Applebloom, who looked at her hooves in shame.
Applejack and Big Mac get to cuss.
Button Mash coughed.
So, are we gonna do character creation now?
Indeed, Small Horse, we shall currently engage in fictitious spontaneous tulpa construction, George said, fire billowing from his nose as he leaned forward, floor sagging. Nailed it.
Reverb.
It's all over now.